Hello, I'm Darren Grimes and welcome to Reasoned UK, the channel that asks you to think more and follow less. Don't forget, if you enjoy the show today, to hit that little subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future content, because boy oh boy do we have some good content coming up just for you. My guest today, well, especially today's content, because my guest today is Dave Rubin. He's an American author with a new book out, which is called Don't Burn This Book. You probably know him as the host of the wildly successful show, The Rubin Report. But that's enough from me. Let's roll the tape. Dave Rubin, welcome to Reasoned UK.
Darren, it's good to be with you. You know, I should tell you as a YouTuber that sometimes even when they click subscribe and they click the notification bell, they don't see your videos. But at least gives them a shot, right?
Is that the YouTube dark arts at play?
It is the dark arts. It's the Sith legend that if you click the bell, that for some reason nothing happens. It's all very curious. It's the gremlins, they tell me.
Right.
The trolls that are in the pipes of YouTube.
Or so they say. Now, Dave, how is it doing a book tour without actually being able to tour?
It's a little bizarre. I mean, I was supposed to be actually on the road right now. We had a month-long tour planned virtually across all of the United States, and then we were going to be in Europe and in Canada and Australia and bouncing around maybe even some other countries, some of the Nordic countries, which I was really looking forward to. I love being out on the road. I love meeting people. As you know, I did about a year and a half with Jordan Peterson on the road, 120 stops in about 20 countries. And it's just so cool to meet people all over the world. The idea that somebody who lives in Florida is thinking the same thing as someone that lives in Dublin, Ireland, who's thinking the same thing as someone in Stockholm, Sweden, and Manchester, UK, and Toronto, Canada. Like that concept, you know, we can all think about it like, oh, we're on YouTube, our ideas can spread across the world. But when you actually go to different places, you hear the different accents, you eat the different foods, and then you realize that people really are the same. We struggle with the same things. We aspire for many of the same things, and that we're all trying, well, not all of us, but most of us, many of us, are trying to fix our lives so we can put something better in the world. It's amazing. So yeah, I'm stuck in my garage doing it, but fortunately I've got a pretty sweet garage. I was a little ahead of the game on the home studio thing, and you know, it's been just fine actually.
Dave,
and if anything, it's probably been a little easier because I can just stay home and do it instead of doing all these hits from local affiliates and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. You roll out of bed and there you are. But you're a dapper man. I doubt you roll out of bed.
I was up about 45 minutes ago. We're doing this at 8 a.m. my time. I was up at about 7:15. I had the coffee. I walked the dog. Here we are.
You're a real trooper. Dave, what's the lockdown actually been like in California?
You know, it's bizarre here. We just heard yesterday this big rumor that they're going to keep us in lockdown for another 3 months. It's a little unclear to me whether that's actually true or not. It sounds like maybe that leaked and now they're walking it back a little bit. But look, everyone in America, in effect, has been locked down for about 2 months now, right? And of course, this is happening all over the world. One of the nice things that we have in America is the idea of federalism, states' rights. So each state can decide what's best for itself. So Texas, for example, which has a Republican governor, they've decided to start opening up. Florida has started opening up, also a Republican governor. In the blue states, the Democratic states, where we've got these progressives who you know, the only way I can tell you is they love power. And there is no evidence that we can't start opening up, or if there is evidence, they haven't shown it to anybody, but we can't go to the beach here. You know, I'm in Southern California, Los Angeles. If you've never been here, I mean, you can go on YouTube, like search Venice Beach. Like this is the perfect weather in the world. That's why everyone lives here and pays the high taxes and the rest of it. We can't go to the beach. They're potentially saying 3 more months of a lockdown. Nobody I know is sick. There's no evidence that young people or healthy people are getting sick. And I think we're seeing governments use some tyrannical powers right now. You can't protect us from everything.
Yeah.
That's not even what life is about. Life is about a little bit of a risk. The idea that it would be somehow illegal for me to invite friends over for dinner, I mean, we've finally been talking about it. You know, like maybe we'll just have friends over for dinner. We can't go to a restaurant, but we can invite friends over. I'm not even sure we're technically allowed to do that. I don't think we are. and I don't want to get myself in any trouble here, but I will tell you that my hair is a little shorter today than it was a few days ago. I'm not saying anything happened. I'm just saying that my hair is a little shorter. So, it's a weird time. It really is a weird time. I think a lot of people are thinking about where they want to live, how they want to work, what kind of houses they want to live in. Do they want to be so dependent on the normal systems? Do they want to start growing some of their own food, take some of their protection into their own hands? There's a lot up in the air, which, although it's scary, I'm also hopeful for that, because I think it's good when people start thinking about their lives more seriously.
Exactly. And I mean, Dave, it's completely mirrored in the United Kingdom. The whole of the UK is in lockdown and nothing's moving, nothing's happening, and people are starting to get a little bit restless. Is that the impression you're getting in the States as well?
Yeah, for the places that are still in lockdown, like California, my neighbors now, you can tell, it's like 2 weeks ago we all had masks on. Now, a couple people have them, most don't. When I walk my dog, I don't wear a mask. People are getting a little closer to each other, all of that kind of stuff. Look, we're not hamsters.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to live in a cage. I'm not even sure a hamster is supposed to live in a cage, but we certainly aren't supposed to live in a cage as human beings. And, it's like we flatten the curve. None of the doomsday predictions happened. And look, is it possible we get a second wave, or we open up and we see little spikes and the rest of it? That is all possible. But the fear of that is not enough to keep us in lockdown forever. So what a mature government would do is say, hey, we're going to start opening up restaurants, but they have to be at 50% capacity. If you park your car in a public parking lot, you have to have a space between you and somebody else. Beaches, you can't go in more than groups of 4. I mean, like a series of things. I'm just making up some things. But this would be a mature way for a government to talk to us. And instead, no, we're not going to really tell you anything. The numbers are almost non-existent, but we're enjoying it. So we're enjoying exercising power. So just sit there and be quiet.
Rubin for president, that's all I can say.
People have been asking. I mean, if that's where we end up, then something has gone horrifically awry in America.
Now, Dave, in your fantastic new book, which everyone should buy a copy of, it's called Don't Burn This Book, and it's available in all good bookstores, although it is out of stock on Amazon UK, which is fantastic news for the classical liberal message that the book is selling. Now, do you believe that in the free trade and human progress that you write about as a classical liberal, with that in mind, what do you think the classical liberal response should be as far as China's concerned?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, I would say I'll answer it two ways. So the first way, I would say, in terms of the classical liberal response just to what it's like to live in a free Western society when your government is sort of encroaching on your rights, it absolutely is your right to speak up. It absolutely is your right to protest. It's your right to assemble. Here in the United States, in effect, our Bill of Rights, our fourth Bill of Right is our fourth given right, is the right to assemble. So you have the right to do all of these things. As for China, it's very hard. I'm guessing we're going to probably get into this a little later, but our media has become so terrible here that it's very hard to understand what's going on. Did China know about this earlier? Did they not tell us stuff? Was this created in a Wuhan lab and accidentally got out? I mean, there's a litany of things that we don't know relative to China. And now we've got, big news organizations that basically just repackage Chinese state propaganda and pretend it's news. The Chinese government said this, and then it's like they put that on NBC News, and it's like, well, all right, that's fine that they said that, but that doesn't mean it's true. Do you guys realize that? But, the media collapse is sort of a secondary effect of this whole thing. As for what we should do about China, I think it's too early to tell. If we found out that there was, direct lies about this, that they knew much more, that they sent us faulty equipment, a series of other things, well, then we have a major problem on our hands, because nobody wants to end up at war. But in effect, if they've shut down the entire world for 2 months because of something they intentionally did, that's an act of war. I'm not saying we want to be bombing China or we want to get into a military conflict or something like that, but there may have to be all sorts of things with sanctions and everything else. One of the interesting side effects of everything with coronavirus is notice how the UN has become completely irrelevant.
Well, exactly.
Completely irrelevant. Nobody has said a word about the UN in 2 months. This is actually one of the things that I think Trump has done particularly well, is that the UN was the most deeply corrupt. It was supposed to be the Justice League, but it became the Legion of Doom, basically. And Trump sort of defunded it. He mocked it. He exposed it for what it is. and it's become completely irrelevant. There have been no meetings over there to figure out what to do with all this because they're powerless in effect. So there's some interesting things happening right now. So I don't know what you really do about China yet. I would be very leery of people that want to push us towards a bigger conflict or sanctions right now. We got to deal with what's happening in our borders right now, just like you guys do.
I mean, you've just took my next question. You've answered it already, but I wonder how much you agree with me that there's a really important distinction to be made between free trade globalization, which I think has overall been a net positive as far as advancing human progress is concerned, and then global governance globalization, which is that the role of these global institutions like the World Bank and the World Health Organization of the United Nations is much more questionable. And surely that's where reforms should be placed, and that's where actually President Trump is getting it right.
Yeah, I would even go further. It's not even that reform should be in place. I don't know that these things should exist as they exist right now. I mean, if you believe in individual rights, if you believe in national sovereignty, if you believe that local is better than global, or that local is better than federal, let's say, then the idea of these giant organizations that can sort of tell countries what to do, or basically are set up to tell countries what to do, or basically bribe them to do things, or sort of force them to do things, well, that's a very anti-liberal position, actually, if we're thinking of liberalism in its truest sense. It's certainly an anti-freedom position, right? It's an anti-libertarian position. So what I like, and I lay this out in the book a bit, some of these ideas really came from one of my guests who wrote a wonderful book that I have right there called The Virtue of Nationalism by Yoram Harzoni. The idea is that you want strong, independent nations that set their borders, set their laws, set their customs, all of their traditions, et cetera, and that's going to be different for every country, right? The United States has a different set of traditions and a different national ethos than the UK or Mexico or Canada. And that's just fine. That's the beauty of an independent nation. Then you want strong independent nations to come together and figure out how to work together at a global scale. That's very different than having sort of a top-down globalist agenda that's basically telling all the countries what to do. I don't think that can work. I think that's why Brexit happened. I think that's why everyone's sort of pushing against these giant organizations that, want to get in everybody's business. And I don't want to be in everybody's business.
Well, exactly. I mean, we saw in our Brexit vote, in our vote for Brexit, a desire to adopt a more sensible immigration system, for example, a recognition that national borders matter, that these things are important, because I think for far too long we took the nation state for granted and our economic and national independence. But I wonder how it's been for you, actually, as someone making that case, because in this country 17.4 million Brits that voted for Brexit were dismissed as being swivel-eyed racist bigots. That's something you address in the book. So I wonder how it's been in the States, and this rejection of borders and walls, for want of a better way of putting it, that people like Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama once backed themselves.
Yeah, it's a great question, because you're right that Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, Chuck Schumer, Dianne Feinstein, all these lefties, Democrats, powerful people, in effect, 10 years ago, you can find them all saying the exact same things that Trump is saying about borders now. Now, he words it a little bit differently, and he's a little more over the top and cartoonish, but you can actually find Obama talking about borders, and if you come here illegally, we're going to send you back, and if you have a kid here, you can't stay, don't bring your kid here. All of these things that we know are the right things. Otherwise, you're saying we shouldn't have borders. Now, there are some people, right? There's some people actually on both sides, the sort of bananas lefty progressives and the real extreme libertarians that really don't believe in borders. I am obviously not one of those people. It sounds like you're not one of those people either. But putting aside those fringes, the idea that we should be able to protect our borders. I mean, look, right now, we know that a virus does not respect borders, obviously. But I would say it's well within the right, not only the right, the duty of the UK to protect its borders as it sees fit, whether that's protecting it from migrants that are just coming over. You don't have a right to be in someone else's country. The UK can set their immigration policy. That's it. Now, that doesn't mean that the policy they set is going to be totally just or right or sensible or whatever. It depends on the government that they have. But the country itself, any country, I mean this for literally every single country on earth, you have a duty to set a policy and then abide by that policy. So while a virus doesn't honor a border, it's very obvious that if you have some borders, you'll be able to protect from a virus a little bit better, right? I mean, if we knew that there were tons of people in Mexico, let's say, that had, forget Mexico because that's too charged. If there were a ton of people in Canada that had coronavirus, would it make sense that we would just let them in here? Everyone knows that's not true. And also, everyone knows there's a reason you have a lock on your front door. I have a lock on my front door and a gate in front of my house. Now, that's not because I'm bigoted or racist or mean. It's because I have a home here. There are things that I want to protect here, including my life, liberty, and property. And I think if we would start thinking about our governments the same way we think about our own lives, it would be a lot better. But yes, you will be labeled a bigot and a racist and a homophobe and a misogynist and the rest of the idiotic labels.
Well, we're going to get on to all of those
really
labels.
Common sense principles, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get on to those labels in a second. But going back to COVID-19, what do you make of President Trump's response to COVID-19 so far?
I think it's basically been fine. Hindsight is 20/20. It's impossible to know exactly what everyone knew. And look, if Barack Obama made the exact same choices as Trump along the way, the media would be telling you that it was great and that everything that's happened is the Republicans' fault and everything else. So that's what I'm more interested in a way. It's like, for anyone that's pointing out, and Trump didn't do this on this day and he did this on this day and the governor said this, it's like, you know what? They're getting information. They're trying to do the best thing. Do you think the guy wanted the virus to spread here? Obviously not. That doesn't mean he did everything, and I'm certainly not. But I think, in effect, his instincts to hand most of this to the states, to say, hey, Greg Abbott, you're the governor of Texas, do what you think is right. Florida, do what you think is right. Cuomo, up in New York, do what you think is right. And then we'll give you help where we can. I think that is very in line with the American system. And I think, the idea that somehow it's been much worse here or something like that, it's like, not really. We have a massive country. You can't compare our country to Sweden, which, the left loves to do all the time. And everyone's in some version of a lockdown. Trump was trying to curtail travel from China early. So, this hindsight game and pretending, oh, well, we knew this back then. It's like, 3-4 weeks ago, the WHO was saying you don't have to wear masks. Now, if you put a video on YouTube saying you don't have to wear masks, your channel will be deleted.
Dave, you've got this platform to talk about classically liberal issues like we are now. If we accept that both of the presidential candidates fighting to become president of the free world later this year, but both of them are pretty lacking as far as classically liberal ideas are concerned and values are concerned. What kind of platform, Dave, according to everything you set out so eloquently within your book, what kind of platform, policy-wise, would your ideal presidential candidate be standing on?
Yeah, well, it's very much everything I laid out in the book. I'll just address the two of them really quickly. I mean, Biden, it's very unclear to me what Biden believes. Putting aside that he's obviously having some cognitive issues, I don't know what he believes at this point. I think that in many ways he was an old school liberal. He was sort of a classical liberal, didn't want the government to do everything. There's a moment in one of the debates, maybe you saw it, where the Democrats never say words like freedom, liberty. They never say words like Constitution or Bill of Rights. There was one time that I can remember that the word Constitution was said in the debate. It was very early on, and Kamala Harris was saying that day one of her presidency, she would do an executive action on guns. Now, that's illegal because you can't do an executive action that takes away a bill, one of our God-given rights. But she said she was going to do it. And then Biden said, whoa, what about the Constitution? And she said, well, Joe, can't we just say, yes, we can? And then she laughed in his face. And I thought, well, that moment was very interesting because she's a progressive like the rest of them, meaning a really far lefty who thinks the government can do whatever they want, whenever they want to. Biden actually does believe in the Constitution. And his point was, well, you can't take away a right. You can't take away one of the Bill of Rights or modify it from the office of the presidency without going through the proper legislative channels. You can't do it. And basically it meant nothing. It was like as if he was playing to the wrong crowd. It was as if the wrong people were in the room, because I don't think the modern left cares about the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. They want power and they want to seize it however they can. That being said, I don't know what Biden believes anymore. This is the same guy who said at the LGBT Equality Forum that, if you're going to jail It's not the gender on your birth certificate that should decide if you're going to a male or a female prison. It's whatever gender you identify as. I mean, we're going to have a lot of male rapists in female prisons, which has happened, by the way. So I think he's been corrupted, as most liberals have, by the progressive ideology. So it's very hard to say how he would govern or what he would believe.
I mean,
as for Trump, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, continue, as for Trump.
Well, as for Trump, do I think Trump has authoritarian tendencies? If we didn't have the separation of powers and Trump could just do what he wanted, absolutely I do. Fortunately, we have an incredible system here that really does curtail the power of the federal government. Trump has done some good things that I lay out in the book. Trump has cut taxes. Trump has cut regulation. As I said earlier, Trump has given power to the states in the midst of this coronavirus. Trump is not looking for us to get into extra wars. I mean, does anyone think Trump is a warmonger that wants to, rampage through the Middle East? It's very obvious that he doesn't. He's scared Iran a little bit, which I think is actually good, because I do believe that, just saying you're anti-war, the left loves to say that because we say we're anti-war, but that's a childish way of looking at the world. I believe that you have to speak softly and carry a big stick, that basically you have to have deterrence. We have a serious army. We're not looking to mess around with anybody. But if you mess with us, we will do something. That's a powerful policy. And I think when Trump killed Soleimani and he dropped that mother of all bombs like the first month into his presidency, that MOAB, it was him saying, hey guys, we're here, don't mess with us. We're resetting American policy that Obama let the red line pass in Syria and a bunch of other things. This is a guy who was a Democrat. Trump is Trump. That is a separate thing. So the best way I can answer your question is, if you believe in the ideas that I presented in the book, if you believe in limited government, if you believe you want to keep more of what you earn,
Absolutely.
If you believe it's all of those things, well then right now I would say you're on the center right. And if Trump is the vehicle for that for now, even if you don't like the way he speaks again or whatever it might be, and I know a lot of people just have this aversion to him, and I'm not saying he's some moral whatever, it's like that is the better choice right now. It's just like I just see no way around it. Trust me, I've tried to look at this thing and go, wait, it can't quite be. Like most liberals, whatever. It's like you look at it and you go, no, that can't quite be. But it's like I see actually no way around that.
Dave, is there anyone from the next generation of politicians that you can see perhaps aligning with those classically liberal ideals a little bit more?
Yeah, Dan Crenshaw in Texas, Congressman Dan Crenshaw. I think he's absolutely fantastic. I think he knows what he believes. He deeply cares about the country. He served in the country. He lost an eye in the country in battle. This is a good man. I think he could be the future of a sort of modern conservative movement. I think Nikki Haley probably fits in there.
Yeah.
And there's probably a few others. But I think what happens on the horizon, if I had to make a prediction, and nobody wants to be in a prediction game, especially during Corona, but my prediction would be Trump wins again. And then after 8 years of Trump, something really happens to the country where the partisan thing really crumbles. And then on the center right, you will see a new crop of Republicans that will be truly intellectually diverse. You will see a crop of people on the right that will be, from classical liberals that might fight for a pro-choice position, for example, to the religious conservatives who fight for the pro-life position, but they all agree that they believe in individual liberty and individual rights and are happy to agree to disagree. So I see that as a huge, huge opportunity on the right. I think you guys have a version of that in the UK. And let's not forget, many other countries over the last couple of years, except for Canada, which voted Trudeau back in, Australia went to the right, Israel went to the right, a few other countries, most of the Eastern European countries have been going to the right anyway. So I think that is sort of the future of Western politics.
Because social democrats are being rejected across the piece, and it's because they've adopted this, there's a line from my good friend James Delingpole which says, if you go woke, you get broke. That's exactly it. And
I would rather people be awake than woke.
Absolutely. Now, Dave, can we quickly touch on, just for our British audience, the dangerous hypocrisy coming from Joe Biden and the Democrats at the moment? If I just explain here, the former staffer of Joe Biden, Tara Reid, accused the former vice president of having sexually assaulted her in 1993. He, of course, emphatically denied it, unequivocally denied it, and his Democrat allies have almost all backed him in said denial. But if we set aside the sheer hypocrisy on display here, given that most of these same Democrats wanted to deem Brett Kavanaugh, Donald Trump's Supreme Court nominee, of being guilty in a similar situation, with even less evidence than in this one, the standard is surely actually quite fair enough, because there must be due process and a fair hearing. Being innocent until proven guilty is such an important legal principle to uphold. But what isn't fair, Dave, and this is what I want you to explain to our listeners, and what's actually deeply morally reprehensible, is that Biden is simultaneously promising to revoke that benefit of doubt from young men who face similar charges. Could you just give us your view on this?
Okay, so there's sort of two things there. There's the general hypocrisy, and then what you're talking about is Title IX on college campuses. So yes, everything that you laid out there is 100% correct in that Brett Kavanaugh, who was a conservative nominee for the Supreme Court, had allegations against him. That's all they were, allegations. And now Joe Biden has allegations. When Kavanaugh had allegations, well, he's thought of as a bad guy because he's on the right and he's a conservative. And every newspaper, every media outlet, everywhere, nonstop cover of everything was he has to step down. He's evil. Another story. Republicans are evil. Everything else. Now it happens to Joe Biden, and the same people, literally the same people who were saying, believe all women. Well, you know what their new move is? Believe all women except some women, right? Because some women are lying because it's our guy now. And then even more perverse than that actually is how the media treats it, because it's not just watching average partisan hacks principles. We all know that. But watching the media say, oh, when it's allegations against a guy we don't like, we're going to go crazy with it for months. When it's allegations against our guy, we're going to basically bury the story as long as we can. So that is more of the hypocrisy. The specific thing that you're talking about, which is super interesting, is Title IX, which now Betsy DeVos, who's our education secretary, who was installed by Trump, she's reversing. And the idea behind Title IX was that basically, I'm not going to give you the exact legal definition, but it was basically that schools were taking away due process from students, meaning if a guy, in most cases it's a guy, if a guy was accused of rape or sexual assault on campus, schools could just kick kids out, they could punish them in a zillion different ways, and they would not have due process under the law. Now, the idea behind Title IX, which was put in by Obama, was, oh, we want to protect women. But like most things that the left does, it starts with something that sounds right, and then the effect of the policy is really something terrible. So we know that kids, usually young men, were being kicked out of schools and punished, and then it would turn out that nothing happened, or it was that they were both drunk, or a series of other things. So your point is quite good, because what Biden is now mocking is that DeVos is getting rid of these ridiculous policies that in many ways you could argue are unconstitutional, because we do have a right to due process. And Biden himself, if he had the allegations that Tara Reid is making, and Biden himself was in college, well, congratulations, Biden, you'd be kicked out of Harvard or Yale or University of Delaware or wherever else. So yes, the hypocrisy is absolutely off the charts.
Well, staying on that point of hypocrisy, could you explain why the book for our British audience was originally called Why I Left the Left? I know you've explained this a lot on your show, but could you set out why you believe that with what you say, liberals, leftists used to always say, I will fight till the death to defend your right to free speech, etc., etc. And now it seems to be they'll do anything they can to curtail your right to free speech if it doesn't fit into their very narrow parameters of what is and isn't acceptable speech.
Yeah, so when I signed the deal, it was to write Why I Left the Left, which is a title of a PragerU video that I did a couple of years ago that has like 20 million views. Wow. And it caught fire. So that phrase was really attached to me. What's interesting, I mentioned this book, I actually never said the phrase. I never said the sentence that I left the left. So when they titled it that, I was like, oh, God, this is terrible, because I was really fighting as a lefty to save the left. What I quickly realized after that was I had seen nothing but devastation on the left, nothing but hate for me and any free thinker on the left. And suddenly the right was going, hey, we disagree with you on abortion. Some of us disagree with you on gay marriage. We disagree with you on the death penalty, blah, blah, blah. Hey, you want to hang out? You want to talk? You want to agree to disagree? And suddenly I was finding that with people like Ben Shapiro and Dennis Prager and Glenn Beck, Larry Elder, the list goes on and on. So I changed the title to Don't Burn This Book. The idea being that what I lay out in this book, these are very common sense principles. You don't have to agree with me on every specific policy position that I take. And I lay out pretty much all of my policy positions. But the idea is that I want you to think for yourself. And in many ways, thinking for yourself is the most dangerous thing for the left. The left loves bumper sticker slogans, sort of like we just said. Like, they wanted to pass Title IX because they think it protects women. But what do you find out? It actually takes due process away. They love the idea of give money to the poor. But what do we find out? That you keep poor people in cycles of poverty. There's we can go on with the examples that they just say what sounds right. Free education, but of course it's not free. Free healthcare, but of course it's not free. All of the things that they push out there sound right if you don't think. That's why young people are attracted to them. Oh my God, yes, we just want to do good things. Why wouldn't we want to do good things? So that's why it works. And the reason then I changed the title to Don't Burn This Book was I thought, well, here, I'm going to lay out common sense principles, but this is going to be pretty dangerous to the lefties. And I didn't expect them to burn the book like this was 1941 Germany, but they are in effect doing a modern book burning because, as you've probably seen, some of these underbelly of the internet sites, Reddit and some of these other things, they have had massive coordinated campaigns to ruin our reviews on Amazon and on a bunch of the online retailers. That is a modern book burning. That is a digital book burning because you burn a book because you don't want people to find out what's inside. So when they do that, and now people go to Amazon and they try to make they want you to get 3 stars instead of 5 stars. It's very obvious. Everyone who's reading the book is totally digging it and feels, that I've presented something really, really thoughtful here. And then, there's just this litany of 1-star things that are mostly just attacking me and lying and the rest of it. By the way, Amazon is well aware that these are all fake reviews. They're not doing anything about it, but they do know about it, and they've seen where it's all being coordinated from. So in effect, that is a digital book burning. So they're proving the very thesis of the book.
Yeah, I mean, it's even, I don't know if you must have seen this, but director Michael Moore recently, for daring to challenge green ideology, they've tried to cancel him and his movie online. For the similar
They'll take out everybody.
Absolutely.
That's what people need to understand. Michael Moore is a far left socialist who became a millionaire in our capitalist society here in America. He's given the left everything they want, but if you take one position anti-left, they will come to destroy you. Mm-hmm. So, I keep telling people, it's like, look, they're going to destroy Bernie Sanders one day, and it'll be his just rewards for what he unleashed on all of us. At the end of the day, Bernie Sanders is going to be thought of as an old white millionaire who lost the presidential election twice and then backed Hillary and Biden. He will not be remembered for anything else other than that. He's never accomplished anything. Becoming a senator and running a couple successful senatorial campaigns, that's not really an accomplishment. Congratulations, you got people to give you money, and then, but he never passed major legislation. He's never done anything in his life except actually bring some bad socialist ideas to America and then right at the end become a sellout.
Well, it's much like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, isn't it? She was elected as this big radical with an independent, loud voice. But actually, she's backed Biden, and now she is, all behind him as far as the Tara Reid allegations are concerned, where she had once said the woman should always be believed.
Politics is about power, man. That's all it's about. If you watch Game of Thrones, it's like Game of Thrones, the whole purpose of Game of Thrones was to attain power. Everyone in that show wanted to attain power. And what happens at the end of Game of Thrones? Basically, everybody's dead. Everyone's dead except the 6 guys or 4 guys at the table at the end, and everyone they know is dead. And they kind of laugh at the end, but they got a pretty miserable life ahead of them. And that's why... Well, that's really why I wrote the chapter about Jordan Peterson also, because you have to have a lens with which to view the world that is much wider than politics. If your whole worldview, and I think this is what's so wrong with progressivism, their whole worldview is based in politics. If the government can do this, if we just took from some and gave to others, and if the government, that's a miserable game. You have to have a philosophical view of the world, or a religious view of the world, or a metaphysical view of the world. You have to have something beyond, I want to do something so that makes it right. And leftists don't have that. I think it's secularism on steroids. It's materialism on steroids.
Do you think that explains their obsession with these green movements, because they are looking to belong to something, and indeed with their obsession with identity politics, because they're looking for that deeper, meaningful connection in life?
I think that absolutely is it. You know, it's a cliche phrase, but there is a God-sized hole in their heart. That's not to say you can't be a perfectly moral or good person as an atheist. Many of my good friends are atheists. Many of my favorite guests from that I have books right here from Sam Harris and Michael Shermer and Peter Boghossian. These are deeply good moral people. But I don't think a society can organize around a lack of belief. I think a society can only organize around something outside of itself, which is why our founders, who gave us incredible freedoms, well, what did they say? You have God-given rights. We didn't give you these rights of freedom. We are protecting these rights of freedom. And at the same time, they said, even though we think they're God-given rights, we're going to separate the church and state. I mean, these are brilliant political documents who were written by men of their time, who are as flawed as any of us. But that secured more freedoms for more people than were ever imaginable. And the left, what the left is in business for is how can we attain power over people's lives. I think many of them have good intentions, but I'm not that interested in intentions. I'm interested in outcomes.
I mean, Dave, I had a conversation recently with Douglas Murray, and I've no doubt that you've experienced this as well. But we were speaking about that if you're on the right, if you push back against woke ideology, you're somehow betraying the community if you're a gay man. And I put community in quotation marks. Now, that happens if you're black as well, right? That happens if you're trans and on the right. What do you think explains this?
Well, it's actually quite obvious if you really think it through, and I'm sure I'm going to give a very similar answer to when Douglas Murray, when you asked him the same question. Douglas obviously is gay. I'm gay. Big damn whoop. I would say that's it. It's probably the least interesting thing about me. It happens to be I'm getting a similar way. They love groups, meaning we're for gay people, we're for women, we're for black people. Again, it gets to what I said earlier. That all sounds right. Like, yeah, we're all for all those people. I'm for women, I'm for black people. But what I mean by that is I'm for equality for all of these people, which is that the government can only make laws that treat everyone the same. And once you've done that, the government has to get out of your way. The government can't say, oh, I'm for this group, because once you say I'm for this group, meaning give them special rights or special treatment, or give them more money or whatever it might be, you have to punish another group. So we see many versions of this in the United States. Harvard has decided that too many Asian students were going to Harvard, so they made it more difficult for Asian students to get in and less difficult for other minority students again. Now, again, this sort of sounds right, like we want to help minorities. So that kind of sounds right. But why should an 18-year-old kid who is Asian, so let's say he's Chinese, his parents moved here, or his grandparents moved here, busted their butts. Nobody gave them anything, just like no one gave my grandparents anything or anyone else's grandparents anything. But they worked hard, they cared about family, they cared about education. We know that these are things that, generally speaking, the Asian community really cares about. They played by the rules. And then the idea is now you're 18 and you're going to be punished because of your skin color and your ethnicity. This is racism. So it's the anti-racists who have injected racism into the system. I don't care if you're black or white or Chinese or gay or straight or anything else. I think all the society can do is give us equal rights. So relative to the gay thing or the black thing or whatever else, it's like, look, why does the left hates people who walk, who are supposed to stay with them? So they say they're for black people. Well, are they for Thomas Sowell? Are they for Larry Elder? Are they for David Webb? Are they for Candace Owens? Of course not. They say they're for women. Are they for Nikki Haley? Or are they for Sarah Sanders? Are they for the litany of other Republican or right-leaning women? Of course not. We're for gay people. Well, they're not for Peter Thiel. They're not for Douglas Murray. They're not for Dave Rubin or Rick Grinnell or Rob Smith. I mean, again, the list goes on and on and on of examples. The left loves groups, and once you love groups, you have to hate individuals.
But what do you think this sort of mob mentality, what do you think the effect of this mob mentality will be? Because my fear is that as far as hard fought for gay rights and trans rights are concerned, that actually what they're doing is fighting against progress, because the obsession with being oppressed, everyone is always oppressed. Someone has to be oppressed. And it's actually not the case anymore. You know, in 2020, in the UK and in the States, we are protected in law, we have equality in law, and that is fundamentally all that should matter. But these groups seem intent, absolutely hell-bent on finding something to be upset about, something to criticize others for, despite the fact...
Well, they need it.
Yeah.
They need it because it's a deeply dim, dark, depressing worldview. If they weren't oppressed, well, then they would have nothing to fight for, and they would have to go out and see what happens with life. They'd have to take it in their own hands and go ahead and move. That's why what's so interesting is people on the right generally believe in personal responsibility. Like, if you work hard, if you're a good person, that you got a chance. It doesn't mean you're going to get everything you want. It doesn't mean that you're going to live a perfect life. It doesn't mean that you're not going to fail yourself along the way, but you got a chance. On the left, they just want to basically rejigger the system constantly to bend to their will. That is incredibly dangerous. I don't think that I am somehow magically a million times better than my father or my grandfather or my ancestors before that. Now, I might be educated a little bit differently. I might have a wider set of knowledge, but also with knowledge, we also forget things. I think in many ways, as we've moved away from the family and all sorts of stuff, which is an odd argument for me to make in many ways, I think we've forgotten some of the good stuff that got us here. So when they say they're progressive, it sounds good. We're progressing. Well, progressing sounds good. Progress sounds good. Except once you're progressing past equality under the law, well, then you're just progressing to totalitarianism. You're progressing to, I want to control everybody. If you tell me that there is anyone that lives in my country or in your country, that there are laws based on their immutable characteristics that are stopping them from being an equal member of society, I will fight with you. And that would be the progress that I would be proud to support. So if you told me that when we freed the slaves, I don't mean like the progressives of today, but like the idea that people who wanted progress to arrive so that these people could be freed and treated like equal human beings. Well, that's a progressive thing I can get on board. If you told me progressive was to get women to be able to vote and a series of other things that have happened that have expanded rights in America over the generations, that is a wonderful thing. But the second you move past equality of opportunity, equal rights, to whatever else you want to do, I'm not interested in progressing anymore. You know what I'm interested in doing at that point? I'm interested in conserving.
Exactly, and I think that must be right. And actually, I think it's in the interests of these groups that happens, because I think the retaliation and the erosion of individual rights, if what these groups manage to push things like arguing, for example, that the immutable fact of biological sex isn't true or doesn't exist, then actually we start to get into really, as you say, totalitarian territory. And actually there might be a retaliation against the hard-won rights, hard-fought-for rights that we've actually secured. They could end up rolling back progress.
As the brilliant Douglas Murray has said, one day the barbarians will be at the gate and we'll debating what gender pronoun to call them.
Beautifully. He is marvellous. He is excellent.
There's nobody better, really.
Now, we've covered quite a lot of ground. I wonder if to end, and no doubt those watching will be eager to learn how we on the right, which is what the book's all about basically, how we on the right can fight back against lazy assertions like Democrats equals good, Republicans equals bad, socialism equals generous, capitalism equals greedy. How do we on the right fight back against this when we've got the full force of the media class, the mainstream media full stop, celebrities, we've got the whole of Hollywood to fight against, and they'll use their followings, their pretty massive followings, to support these fallacies. How do we on the reasoned, common sense right actually fight back against this?
Well, I would say this is probably the purpose of the book more than anything else. I want to arm people so that they are able to fight back. You know, I think a lot of people think, oh, this thing will pass. I could just sit it out. I'll be quiet and I'll get through it. And that's really not how it works. There's, of course, the story of the frog in the slowly boiling pot. And that's really all you are. The more you acquiesce to them, the more you give them room because you think you're protecting themselves, you're actually the one turning up the heat on the pot, okay? So I think the most important thing you can do is start speaking up. You don't have to agree with every specific policy that I've laid out in this book, as I say in the book itself. But what you do have to do is think for yourself, and then if you live in a free society, think about if you're, how old are you?
I'm 26.
You're 26. So think about what your grandparents lived through, okay? Think about what my grandparents lived through. Both of my grandfathers fought in World War II. One was a pilot, one fixed engines, okay? I haven't fought in a war. They fought for freedoms.
Mine was in Korea.
There you go. I mean, they fought for freedoms. They fought to stop the encroachment of communism, of socialism, of Nazism, to free us so that you can live in an incredibly, almost unconscionably, or free country, not unconscionably, unimaginably free country that you live in today, that I live in today. And imagine what they would think if I could talk to my grandfathers who are both long gone, if I could say to them, well, you guys did that, and I sit on Twitter all day, and I've got an iPhone, and all this, and Netflix, and everything else, and I'm afraid to say what I think. I'm afraid to tweet out my thoughts about limited government. Yeah, I know you were fighting the Nazis, but my problems are much bigger, obviously. It's patently absurd. We only live free by the grace of God, meaning we only live free that because someone made us free. But if we're willing to not fight for it, then we'll get exactly what we deserve. But I'm going to continue fighting. I suspect you will as well.
Yes, you and me both, Dave. Thank you very much for joining me today. And I urge everyone that's watching to click the link in the description and buy a copy of your book, because it really is fantastic and it's just what we need right now.
Darren, from one interviewer to another, you're a great interviewer, and I've enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you very much. Have a fantastic day. As I said, do subscribe to this channel because we're putting out loads of new content that I'm sure you're going to enjoy. Do share it. This interview with Dave, I'm sure you'll agree, has been absolutely fantastic. And let me know how you're going to fight that bravery deficit, how you're going to fight against this woke ideology that has captured the West. Thank you very much.